At my promotion dinner, my wife whispered to her sister, "Once he signs the new contract, I'm filing. He'll be locked into alimony forever." I was standing right behind them with the dessert menu. I didn't say a word, just walked back to the table, signed the check, and 30 minutes later, she was frantically calling my phone because the joint account was already empty. I, 34M, had spent the better part of 6 months working toward the VP position at my firm. The kind of role that comes with a corner office, a substantial salary bump, and the sort of stock options that could set up a comfortable retirement. My wife had been supportive throughout the process, or so I thought. She attended the company dinners, smiled at all the right moments, and told everyone how proud she was of me. The promotion dinner was at an upscale Italian place downtown, the kind with cloth napkins and a wine list thicker than most novels. We were celebrating with her sister and brother-in-law, along with a couple of colleagues from my firm. The evening had gone well. Good food, better wine, and the kind of conversation that flows easily when everyone's relaxed. I had excused myself to find our waiter and ask for the dessert menu, thinking we might as well end the night on a high note. The restaurant had a narrow hallway leading to the restrooms, and just before it opened into the bar area, there was a small alcove with a decorative plant and a bench. That's where I found them. My wife and her sister, heads close together, voices low but not quite low enough. I stopped mid-step, dessert menus in hand, and heard my wife say something that made my blood run cold. She told her sister that once I signed the new contract, she was filing for divorce. The way she said it was so casual, so matter-of-fact, like she was discussing dinner plans. She went on to explain that the timing was perfect because the new salary would lock me into higher alimony payments forever. Her sister laughed and said something about finally being free, and my wife agreed, adding that she had already consulted with a lawyer who confirmed the strategy was sound. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 30 seconds. My mind raced through the past few months, reinterpreting every supportive comment, every encouraging smile. It all made sense now. The sudden interest in my contract details, the way she had pushed me to accept the promotion even when I was hesitant about the longer hours. She wasn't supporting my career. She was setting up her exit strategy. I walked back to the table, handed out the dessert menus, and acted like nothing had happened. My colleagues were discussing some industry gossip, and I joined in with what I hoped was the right amount of enthusiasm. My wife returned a few minutes later, all smiles, and slipped her hand into mine under the table. I didn't pull away. I just sat there, calculating. The check came, and I signed it without looking at the total. Everyone thanked me for dinner, and we made our way to the parking lot. My wife was chatty on the drive home, talking about how nice the evening had been and how happy she was for me. I made the appropriate noises in response, my hands steady on the wheel, even though my mind was working through a very different kind of problem. When we got home, she went upstairs to get ready for bed. I told her I needed to catch up on some emails and would be up soon. Instead, I sat in my home office and opened my laptop. The joint account had been something we set up years ago, back when we were newlyweds, and everything felt like a partnership. Over the years, it had grown substantially. My bonuses, tax returns, and a chunk of my salary all flowed through it. She had access to everything, and I had never thought twice about it. I transferred every dollar out of that account. It took maybe 10 minutes to move it all into a new individual account I opened with a different bank. Then I logged into our investment accounts, the ones that were technically joint but funded entirely by my income. I liquidated what I could without penalty and moved those funds as well. By the time I was done, the joint account had exactly $12.37 in it, just enough to keep it from auto-closing. I also sent a quick email to my firm's HR department and legal counsel, marking it urgent. I explained that due to unforeseen personal circumstances, I needed to review the terms of my new contract before signing. I asked them to hold off on processing anything until we could meet first thing Monday morning. Then I forwarded myself every document related to the promotion, including the detailed compensation breakdown. My wife came downstairs around 11, asking if I was coming to bed. I told her I would be up soon, just had a few more things to finish. She kissed the top of my head and went back upstairs. I sat there in the dark for another hour, just thinking. The next morning was Saturday. I woke up early, made coffee, and waited. My wife slept in, which was normal for her on weekends. Around 9, I heard her phone start ringing upstairs. Then it rang again. And again. She finally answered, and I could hear her voice, confused at first, then rising in pitch. She came downstairs a few minutes later, phone in hand, face pale. She asked me if something was wrong with the bank because the account was showing almost nothing. I took a sip of my coffee and told her that everything was fine. I had just moved some money around. She stared at me for a long moment, and I watched her trying to decide how to play it. She asked where the money went, trying to keep her voice light, like it was just curiosity. I told her it was in a safe place and that we would talk about it later. She didn't like that answer. Her tone shifted, becoming more insistent. She said we needed to talk about it now, that it was joint money and she had a right to know. I agreed that we did need to talk, but I wanted to wait until Monday when I could have my lawyer present. The word lawyer hit her like a physical blow. She sat down across from me, and I could see her mind racing, trying to figure out what I knew and how much damage control she needed to do. She asked me what was going on, said I was scaring her. I didn't respond, just drank my coffee and looked at her. She tried a different approach. Tears started forming, and she said she didn't understand why I was being like this, that we were supposed to be celebrating. I set down my coffee cup and finally spoke. I told her I had heard her conversation with her sister at the restaurant. I watched the color drain completely from her face. She tried to deny it at first, said I must have misunderstood, that I was taking things out of context. I cut her off and repeated back to her, almost word for word, what she had said about the contract and the alimony. The look on her face told me everything I needed to know. There was no misunderstanding. She switched tactics again, this time going for anger. She said I had no right to clean out the joint account, that it was illegal, that she would call the police. I calmly explained that since it was a joint account, I had every legal right to withdraw the funds. I also mentioned that I had already spoken with a lawyer on Friday afternoon, right after I had gotten home and made the transfers. A small lie, but one I knew I could back up by Monday. The rest of the weekend was Arctic. She stayed in the guest room and spent most of her time on the phone, presumably with her sister and the lawyer she had already consulted. I stayed in my office, organizing documents and building my case. On Sunday evening, she tried one more approach. She came to me, apologized, said she had been confused and scared about our future, that she didn't really want a divorce. She begged me to put the money back, said we could work through this. I told her we were far past that point. I had already decided I wasn't signing the new contract, at least not in its current form. I reached out to a trusted mentor over the weekend, someone who had gone through a nasty divorce himself. He connected me with both a family law attorney who was known for being absolutely ruthless and a contracts lawyer who could help me navigate the employment situation. Update 1. Monday morning came, and I was in my family lawyer's office by 8. I had brought every financial document I could find, including bank statements, investment portfolios, and a detailed breakdown of what I had earned versus what she had contributed during our marriage. The lawyer was a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She listened to everything, took notes, and then laid out my options. The good news was that I had acted quickly. By moving the funds immediately and before any divorce filing, I hadn't violated any court orders. The money was mine to manage as I saw fit. The lawyer also noted that my wife's clear intention to time the divorce filing to maximize alimony would work in my favor if she could prove the premeditation. The contract situation was trickier. I met with the employment lawyer right after, and he reviewed my promotion offer. He suggested I negotiate a different compensation structure, one that was heavier on deferred stock options and lighter on base salary. This would give me the same long-term earning potential, but dramatically reduce my immediate income for alimony calculation purposes. He said my firm might resist, but given my value to the company, they would likely work with me if I framed it as personal financial planning. I went into work around noon and requested an immediate meeting with my boss and the head of HR. I explained that I had some personal circumstances that required me to restructure the compensation package before signing. I didn't go into details, but I made it clear that I was still committed to the role, just needed different terms. They were surprised but agreed to hear me out. My contracts lawyer had prepared a revised offer that shifted a significant portion of my salary increase into restricted stock units that would vest over 5 years, along with performance bonuses that were discretionary rather than guaranteed. The base salary increase was minimal, just enough to justify the title change. My boss asked if I was sure about this, noting that it was a lot more risk on my end. I assured him I had my reasons, and that this structure actually aligned better with my long-term goals. They said they would need a few days to run it through legal and finance, but they didn't seem opposed. I left that meeting feeling like I had regained some control over the situation. When I got home that evening, my wife was waiting. She had clearly been crying, and she asked me if we could talk. I agreed, but only with the understanding that anything she said might be used in divorce proceedings. That seemed to shake her, but she pressed on. She admitted that she had been thinking about divorce, that she had felt neglected and unhappy for a while. She said she had made a mistake in how she handled it, that she should have talked to me first. I asked her point blank if the only reason she was having this conversation now was because I had moved the money. She couldn't answer that. The silence told me everything. I informed her that I had already filed for divorce that morning. My lawyer had the papers ready to go, and they would be served to her within the next day or two. I also told her that I had documented evidence of her premeditated plan to time the divorce with my promotion, and that we would be fighting any alimony claims aggressively. She broke down completely, begging me to reconsider, saying she loved me and didn't want to lose me. But I was done. I had spent the entire weekend replaying our marriage in my head, looking for signs I had missed. And I found them. The time she had encouraged me to work late, not because she supported my career, but because it gave her more freedom. The way she had slowly separated her life from mine, building a social circle that didn't include me. The financial decisions she had pushed that, in hindsight, seemed designed to inflate our lifestyle so she could claim she was accustomed to a certain standard of living. Update 2. The divorce papers were served to her on Wednesday. She was at home when the process server showed up, and according to him, she had taken the envelope without saying a word. I had moved most of my essential belongings to a corporate apartment my firm kept for visiting executives. They let me use it temporarily when I explained I was going through a separation. My lawyer had filed on grounds that avoided any messy accusations, just irreconcilable differences, but we included a detailed financial affidavit that showed exactly how much of our marital assets had come from my income alone. My wife had worked part-time as a coordinator for a nonprofit during the first few years of our marriage, but had quit about 4 years ago, saying she wanted to focus on our home life. At the time, I had been supportive, thinking we were building towards starting a family. That conversation never progressed beyond vague someday talk. Her lawyer responded with a counterfiling that demanded spousal support, half of all assets, and claimed that she had sacrificed her career to support mine. My lawyer had expected this and was ready. We filed a motion to have temporary orders put in place that prevented either of us from dissipating assets, which was ironic given that I had already moved everything. But it protected me going forward. The real breakthrough came about 2 weeks into the process. My lawyer had subpoenaed my wife's phone records and email as part of discovery. What we found was illuminating. She had been communicating with her lawyer for nearly 4 months, well before my promotion was even officially announced. The emails detailed her strategy, including specific discussions about waiting to file until after I signed the contract. There were also messages between her and her sister that were even more damaging, including jokes about how much she was going to enjoy spending the alimony money. My lawyer filed a motion to deny spousal support based on this evidence, arguing that my wife had engaged in economic manipulation and had never intended to remain in the marriage. The judge ordered a hearing, and we presented everything. Her lawyer tried to argue that exploring options wasn't the same as executing a plan, but the judge wasn't buying it. The premeditation was too clear, the timeline too convenient. During this same period, my revised contract with the firm had been approved. My new compensation package was exactly as I had requested, heavy on deferred compensation and light on base salary. I signed it with my lawyer present, and we filed it as part of the divorce record. My actual take-home pay for the next year would be only marginally higher than my previous role, though my long-term wealth building was significantly improved. The preliminary hearing on spousal support didn't go well for my wife. The judge expressed serious concerns about her conduct and indicated that he was inclined to deny any ongoing support, though he would reserve final judgment until the full divorce trial. He did order me to pay temporary support for 3 months while things were sorted out, but it was based on my old salary, not the new contract, and it was far less than what she had been asking for. My wife's lawyer tried to argue that I had deliberately restructured my compensation to avoid support obligations, which was true, but my lawyer countered that I had made a legitimate business decision based on personal financial planning, and that I had every right to structure my income as I saw fit, especially when I had discovered my wife's plan to exploit my earnings. Update 3. The final divorce trial happened about 4 months after I had initially filed. In that time, my wife had tried multiple approaches to reconcile, all of which I ignored. Her sister even showed up at my office once, trying to convince me that my wife had made a mistake and that I was being cruel. I had security escort her out. At trial, we presented everything. The recorded conversation evidence was deemed inadmissible since I hadn't been part of the conversation and the restaurant was technically a private space, but the emails and text messages were fair game. My lawyer painted a picture of a calculated plan to exploit my success, and the timeline supported every claim. My wife's lawyer tried to pivot, arguing that even if her timing was suspect, she was still entitled to support based on the years she had spent as my spouse and the career sacrifices she had made. My lawyer countered with evidence that her part-time work had been minimal even before she quit, that she had no actual career to sacrifice, and that she had spent most of her time during our marriage on personal pursuits, not supporting my career in any meaningful way. The judge took a week to issue his ruling. When it came down, it was better than I had hoped. He granted the divorce and divided assets, but not equally. Because I could prove that the vast majority of our wealth had come from my income alone and that she had contributed minimally, he awarded me 70% of the marital assets. The house, which we had bought primarily with my bonus money, was to be sold and the proceeds split according to that same ratio. As for spousal support, the judge denied it entirely. He stated in his ruling that my wife had demonstrated clear evidence of attempting to manipulate the legal system for financial gain, and that her conduct warranted a departure from standard support guidelines. He also noted that at her age and with her education, she was perfectly capable of supporting herself through employment. My wife appealed, but her lawyer advised her that the appeal was unlikely to succeed given the strength of the evidence. She eventually dropped it after burning through what remained of her portion of the assets on legal fees. The whole process took about 8 months from start to finish. In that time, I had thrown myself into my new role at work, and the deferred compensation structure I had negotiated turned out to be brilliant. The stock had appreciated significantly, and my net worth had actually increased despite the divorce settlement. I saw my wife one final time at the closing when we sold the house. She looked tired and angry. She tried to say something to me as we were leaving, but I just walked past her. There was nothing left to say. I learned a hard lesson about trust and about paying attention to the signs that something is wrong. But I also learned that acting quickly and decisively, even when it hurts, is sometimes the only way to protect yourself. My wife had seen me as a paycheck, a long-term investment that would fund her comfortable exit. Instead, she walked away with a fraction of what she had planned for and the knowledge that her greed had cost her everything. I moved on, started dating again about a year later. I'm more careful now, more aware of red flags. And I never, ever discuss my finances early in a relationship. Some people might call what I did cold or calculating, but I call it self-preservation. She had made her choice the moment she started planning to use my success against me. I just made sure I wasn't around when she tried to execute that plan. Looking back, the worst part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the realization that I had been living with someone who saw me as a means to an end rather than a partner. That dinner, overhearing those words, it didn't destroy my life. In a strange way, it saved it. Because I got out before she could do the damage she had planned, and I walked away with my dignity and most of my assets intact. Sometimes the best revenge isn't elaborate or dramatic. Sometimes it's just refusing to be the victim someone expects you to be. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with friends or family who might enjoy it too.